Hello, welcome to another video. This one I thought I would share with you a little bit of the behind the scenes that goes into making videos, the software that I use, the settings I use, stuff like that. Uh, Useful if you're actually looking at doing any of this yourself, and also just so you can see a little bit about what goes into making the videos and stuff. So I use OBS Studios for pretty much all of my recording. We'll go through a few of the things. We'll start there and then we'll move over into the editing side of things after we talk about how I do the actual recordings. And then we'll go into the editing and I'll have a bit of discussion about some of the other things that I think about when it comes to the creative process, the research, so on. So if you are also looking to create content, I'll give you some good ideas on things to think about and some stuff that you really want to be doing if you're thinking about trying to be successful. So right off the bat, I've got OBS Studios installed. We've got it right here, just moving around a bit. We can enable or disable the preview just so that you don't get window, whatever. It's not a big deal. So first off, we're going to have scenes. So I've created 3 different scenes. I've created a scene here that's designed specifically for streaming with Twitch or whatever. And my monitor is actually an ultra wide monitor. So what I've done is I've made it so that it'd be better if there was actually something to see in here, but you can see this element that's highlighted in red, which is my Twitch chat box, and then the actual game would sit above that line, and I'd get that 21:9 resolution in there with this black space on the bottom, and then I can add in a fancy little logo over there. I've got my webcam, and I've got the actual black bar. Anyways, so you're not seeing quite the same as what I'm seeing, I guess. But yeah, that's the general idea. I've got my Twitch streaming set up. And then the sources here, I've got the chat box, which is just a website using the Streamlabs website. So I create an account through Streamlabs, and then I set up a Twitch chat. You have to give me your Twitch login information and that and so on. A lot of people do use this software, so I decided to just blindly trust them because a lot of other people are also blindly trusting them and hasn't screwed me over yet. I do also have an image that shows up, and this goes over top of everything except for the chat itself. And that just allows, when you're gone, so on. It's always great to have an image like that. You also have some controls at the bottom here where you can mute things, unmute things, so on. We'll get into that in a little bit. We've got our webcam, static images, and then actual game sources, depending on which game you're playing. And then this other thing, which is game only audio. So what this is I've added a audio input capture, and then I've set it to this one that nothing goes to. So this is a device that nothing uses. And what I could do is I could go into my Windows sound settings, and once I have the game launched, I could tell the game to send the sound to this audio device. And the reason why this is quite useful is, say you have multiple audio sources on your desktop, you don't always want to capture them all. Sometimes you just want to capture that very specific audio source for the game. You don't want to capture your Discord or your YouTube or your music or whatever. So it's good to have this as a backup option and set up and ready to go. So all I would have to do is turn it on like this, make it visible basically, and then mute my actual desktop audio. So while we're on the subject of audio, this is one thing that took me a little bit to figure out, but was immensely useful once I did figure it out. So we'll go back to our scene for the desktop here, and we'll show you. I'm going to go under the little cogwheel beside any of these audios. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to go under advanced audio properties. So there's quite a few useful things under here. You can actually sync and put an offset, a delay, so that usually your webcam image is a little bit delayed compared to the actual audio. So if you put a delay, it'll help sync it all up in live. I've done it and I've had issues with it, so I've just left it at 0, and I've allowed things to be a little out of sync for the live streaming and recording. And then in the software for the editing, I actually fix up any audio sync issues at that point, because I've had troubles with it not always working correctly in OBS, and some videos come with really weird out of sync issues as a result. So that's there. So we've got a few things. We can uncheck this to show all of our sources, not just our active sources. That's very helpful. And you'll notice the game audio only is the only one that doesn't say monitor off. So you do need to monitor this or you won't hear it in your own headphones. So because this is getting sent to an audio device that isn't actually plugged in, isn't actually outputting volume to you, you're going to need to have the monitor turned on. So monitor and output for the actual recording. So monitor would let you hear it, output actually outputs it. something like that. I haven't actually double checked and tested this setting. It's been a long time since I've used it, and I just recently reset up all my OBS Studio. So if it's wrong, comment below. I mean, don't tell anyone. So the real big thing that I want to show you, in addition to the monitoring that you need to do for this game-only audio, is tracks. So multi-track audio is a very useful feature. It has saved me a couple of times once I started using it correctly. So everything that's going to go to your Twitch stream needs to be in track 1. So that's always going to be output in your live stream, whether it's YouTube, whatever else that you're streaming to. It doesn't have to be Twitch. And then everything else can go in your recording. We'll get into those settings in a bit of how I make sure that which ones are going to the stream versus which ones are for the recording. But what I've done is you can see there's 2 desktop audios, desktop audio and desktop audio 2, and you'll notice that only one of them goes to the stream and the other one goes to the recording, or track 2. The reason why I have it set up like this is because I found that the gain that I've set here, you'll notice it's different between the two. So when it takes a desktop audio and puts it on the stream, I find that I want the volume to be a little bit different than when I do an actual recording. And on top of that, I've also found that for whatever reason, it just seems to output it a bit louder to the stream than to the recording. So therefore, I've created 2 different audios there. And you'll also notice that the game audio is under the same track as the desktop audio and the microphone. So you want to put everything that you want to capture for your recording under the second track. You want to have it all on the very first track that's going to be part of the recording file. So that way when you play it, just open up, play it, it's going to play like normal. Audio is all going to be there, and it's going to work really well when you don't need the audio split up. It's very easy to work with and way more convenient than having everything on different tracks from the beginning. And then we split our audio after that. So you can see track number 3 is just my microphone and nothing else. Track number 4 is just desktop audio and nothing else. And now this is something where potentially I could say, well, what happens if I screw up and I forget to mute desktop audio 2 when I meant to have game only audio? Well, I can put game only audio on its own track. I'm going to leave it on track 4 and then additionally just put on track 6. And then track number 5 is going to be my actual audio for game recording. It doesn't actually create any sound, but whatever, I just put it there. I guess I could put the game only audio on track 5 then as a result. Really not a big deal. So you only get 6 tracks for whatever reason, that's the maximum. But you can definitely take advantage of splitting your audio up this way. Just remember that everything that goes to your stream is track 1, everything for your recording on track 2, and then after track 2 you can split things up and have individual things showing up on your different tracks to make it a lot easier to edit the audio later if you need to fix anything and you need to split your sources up. Very useful little tip. So we talked about my first scene there. Now we've talked about the audio. I've also got a 16:9 recording. So this one would simply record a section of my screen that's 16:9 ratio, so it cuts off the sides, and we don't have the resulting black bar underneath. So with the Twitch here, there's going to be this black area along the bottom. I guess you can't see the desktop, so it doesn't really matter, but and then this one, the game would fill up the entire area, including right behind me. And then this one is simply 16:9, except that instead of capturing a specific window or game source, it captures just the pure raw desktop. And then, of course, you can add whatever you want to each one to have your appropriate stuff. So you'll notice that game-only audio is on all 3 of them. I guess you can't really see as I switch scenes, you can't see the settings for each scene, which is unfortunate, as it's not recording the desktop at that point. What I should have done is I should have opened up 2 OBS Studios. So we can fix that up right now. We're going to launch a second one just to show you quickly there, because I forgot all about that. Woo! Okay, so we're going to disable preview on that one. So here's our Twitch stream setup. I've got Twitch chat box. I've got my Be Right Back screen. I've got my webcam. I've got the games that I might actually be playing. And then I've got the game only audio. And then 16:9 recording, I've got, again, a Be Right Back screen. I don't have a Twitch chat attached to this because I don't plan on ever doing it for streaming. I've got my webcam. I've got a media file, which I can turn on. So if I turn this one on, this is just a file of something I've pre-recorded. So it's right there. And then, I don't know. Oh, my webcam's in use by the other OBS. That's why I won't let it show on this one. So this is very useful for doing voiceover recordings. I've got another video on my channel on how I do voiceover recordings with OBS, and this is how I do it. So in this mode, I would load up a file like this, and then wouldn't be a live recording behind me. And that gives you a lot of flexibility because you can choose where you want to be in there. You can pause it, you can stop, you can restart, play, so on. So you've got a bunch of different options there. And then, yeah, our desktop setting, we can definitely tell what that one is. So these are the different settings that I've got here in terms of the three main scenes from my three different uses. So it's not often I want to use the desktop mode, but sometimes I do. So when I stream Star Wars The Old Republic, if I'm doing a raid and I want to capture the raid overlays, they're a feature of the desktop. They're not actually a feature of the game itself. So there's a couple ways I could add those back in. The easiest way though is just to record the desktop. And then of course doing content like this where I want to show you things that are on the desktop and not in the game, this desktop setting works the best. You know, I've got a few videos where I'm opening web browsers and different things. So it makes way more sense than one of the other two settings, which, you know, one captures my whole ultra-wide monitor with black space on the bottom, and it has the option to add in the Twitch chat. And sometimes I use that for recording. And then the 16:9 recording so the game fills up the whole screen. And I don't actually like to record at the 21:9, even though there will be some people who can use that format. I just don't think it's really worth the extra file size and everything for that. But it has bitten me in the butt a few times when it turns out I've left things off screen and I haven't been paying attention to what will actually show up on that 16:9 area of the screen, and had to sadly re-record some stuff as a result or do some interesting editing after the fact. Now let's look a little bit about what kind of settings you're going to want to look at using. So we've got a general settings here. You can take pause and look. Really, I didn't have to change much at all or any of these. The areas that are going to be important to you, you can do your stream settings and set up some stuff there. The output tab is where we deal with things like audio tracks and some other things. So if you can, and you're not using a very specific set of hardware, you want to be using an encoder that's your GPU. So if you're using an NVIDIA graphics card, it would be NVIDIA NVENC, NVENC, and that's going to be your best option there. If you're using an ATI card, I forget, or AMD card, I forget exactly what it's called, but they've also got their own encoder. You do have the option to rescale output. So for the streaming, my desktop is 1440p. So I rescale it down to 1920 by 1080 and then have it upload that. Constant bitrate. As far as I understand, to Twitch, your maximum bitrate is 6,000 unless you're a partner. So I've just had it 5,800. Good enough. Preset, quality, profile. I don't know. I think those are all default. You'll notice under audio track, only audio track 1 has a radio button selected, and then a Twitch VOD track 2, which would be like my, that's the recording settings. So I don't know why I did that. Maybe I should have left it at 1. Oh well. And then recording tab. So when you're doing an actual recording, which is what I'm doing right now, not a live stream, here would be your settings again. And you can see audio tracks. I've unselected audio track 1, and I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 selected. So it outputs all of those other audio tracks. NVIDIA NVENC yet again. I've chosen to not rescale the output and leave it at the native resolution, even though it does create larger file sizes on my computer. The fact that I'm starting with a higher quality file before I do my editing and exporting, I've just decided that that's what I feel like working with. You can definitely rescale it to 1080 and have great quality. And that's what I was doing for the longest time, was rescaling it. And I've decided now I'm going to start uploading 1440p for those people who do have it and want to use it. Rate control, I did a bit of research here. I found CQP seemed to be the best option for having a balance of your needs of quality. And really, if you want, you can set the CQP to a value that's even lower than 20 to get exceptionally good quality out of it. So 20 is the default, works well. It's a high quality file. It's not perfect, but it's a high quality file, and it works quite well for the majority of stuff, even fast moving stuff. You can go definitely better than 20 by picking a lower value, but if you're doing YouTube and you're uploading to there, you're going to find that it's kind of wasted to have that extra quality. YouTube won't actually end up using that extra quality, as they do add their own compression in. And then audio replay buffer, I've never really touched those, not too important. again, audio, you can do a few things here, such as setting up what's desktop audio 1 and 2 if you want, or what's your microphone, the defaults like that. You can do a few other things here. Video, this is where you would set your actual base canvas resolution when you want to do the output scaled resolution. So you can see I had to manually type in an aspect ratio of 16 by 9 because it always would otherwise choose my monitor, which is 21 by 9. And then I said, here's what I want you to rescale it to. And then here's the downscale filter. We picked the highest quality one, and then frames per second value here. So those are the main things that you got to look out for. Something else I didn't mention about the audio that can be quite important is filters. You don't necessarily always need filters, but there are a lot of options for adding in filters to do things like a compressor tries to even out the sound so that you don't get these really sudden high volumes that blow out someone's eardrum, that it'll compress those sounds based on some settings. And then gain is just overall increase the volume. I found that the mic was a little bit on the quiet side, so it's got a gain of 4 decibels by default. So there's a lot of little useful audio filters you could throw in as well. All right, where were we? I think that's pretty much everything I need to show you about the recording side. So earlier today I was playing around and, oh, I actually deleted those files already. That's fine. I was just doing some testing recording on some different settings on one of the games that had a lot of fast motion and stuff and seeing what not. So I end up with all of these different files here. And then I'm using a free program called Shotcut. I just downloaded and installed it, open source, and it's working quite well. And I really haven't touched or changed any of the settings really about it. So what you're seeing right here is a project that's open. Now, a few areas to draw your attention to. So right here where my mouse is, you can see playlist, filters, properties, export, very useful area. Playlist is where you'd add all the different content that you want to bring in and do your editing with, have available to you. Filters is when you select an area in your timeline down here, you can apply filters. Properties, pretty self-explanatory. And export when you're ready to export. Or of course, up here, there's also an export button when you're ready to export. We'll talk about that in a bit. So now let's talk about this main area in the window. You can see this preview. I can do click on this source tab under there or this project tab. So it's not working right now. I don't know why, but project tab is what I like to be in. So basically, to do all my timeline editing, you want to be selected on the project tab. You don't want to be selected on the source tab. I think the problem is right now it's not actually properly added in as a source. So there we go. Yeah, something went wrong. So it's pretty simple drag and drop to add additional things. So say that you needed to add, you can add static images in, you can add in additional video if you've got other video that you want to be able to do. You can also do audio files as well. So I've got, so under YouTube music, I've got some royalty-free music that I've downloaded and I've got so I can put it in. So a small collection there. And then, so now we've got a few things loaded up. We've got a still image, we've got 2 videos, we've got a couple audio files. Actually, let's add in another still image. So this image here, I've used whatever image editing program you want that isn't just Paint. So I've used a program called paint.net, which is also a free program. And it's got a transparent background. So it's just text with a transparent background. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So we'll update our paint.net in the middle of this. All right, so now we've got a few different things added. So how do we actually interact and work with these? Well, the first thing, this project's already been started. So this video file has been put in my timeline, dragged into this video track. And then let's say that I want to add more features. Now, let's start by adding an extra video track. So we actually have more than one. And then let's add a audio track as well. And then we'll add a couple of those. All right, so we've added a couple audio tracks, we've added another video track, and we've got our existing one that was our default one that we already have some content in and have already started doing a bit of editing on. So now there's a few buttons and a few shortcuts that I use all the time that I'll draw your attention to here. So you just saw me doing the track operations to add tracks, and then also from there, you've got your simple cut, copy, paste. And then you've got a few other things. Append to the current track. So this would add it in. Append means, like putting afterwards. And then ripple delete. So remove the current clip and shifting everything to the left. So you can see on my timeline here, the part that's darker, this segment is selected. So if I press the X hotkey, it's going to delete it and it's going to shift everything in the timeline to the left. And then I can just Control Z to undo it. But if I choose to use this one here not that one. Here we go, lift, remove current clip without affecting the position of other clips. You can see now it creates this dead space in here. So depending on which track you have selected, you'll get kind of this yellowish, greenish color. And that area means there's nothing there right now. You do also have, I'd have to do Control Z a few times here. There we go. And Control Y is your redo. So that is our lift clip. And then we've got overwrite the clip onto the current track. So I pretty much never use this. I don't like overwriting because what happens if you got the length of the clip wrong and you put it in the wrong place and you overwrite something you don't want to. You can use overwrite when it's on the very end, but at that point you're not overwriting. So who cares? Either way, that's something I just don't use, just to be clear. Whereas the paste will put it in at the current location. So your white bar here, I forget what they call this white bar. We'll see that later, what they call it. Everything is at that point. So if you just paste, you'd be putting in content at that point. So let's just do that. Let's copy this little piece right here. Or you can go up here and you can pick like the other video and you can copy it up here as well. Let's do that instead. I'm going to select the area we want to paste it. We're going to paste and it's going to insert it. It's going to automatically create a break between where we had that line in the original content and then shift everything appropriately. So now we've got straight into the original video here, and then we've got the new video there. So move our OBS out of the way and let's actually mute our desktop audio for now. So that way when I play any of these things back, they're not going to interfere with the actual recording itself. Oh, right. So I'm just going to undo that because I don't actually need that. So that's a little bit there. Now, the other thing we can do is to put content in, drag and drop. So this one, I actually wanted to put it up on a different video track. It's going to actually display itself over top of the video track underneath. Layers kind of work in order from bottom to top. Or usually what you'll see is something like this. So now I can put in this text. And now I've got text overlaid on top of the actual video. And you're going to need to make a new track for a new video track for everything you want to have layered at the same time. As you can see, this now just replaced it. So I can't have two items at once. So if I wanted that image on there at the same time as I have the text, I would need to create another video track. So that's important to note. It's a little bit annoying. It can make all of your tracks get a bit cluttered, or a lot of tracks, but it's just what I've found. The audio files, of course, if we want to add in some music, some of this nice royalty-free music, we've got it there. And the other thing that's really important that can become an issue is when you're dealing with the multi-track audio is Shotcut. When you select your video here and you go under Properties and then you go under Audio, you're going to see it has for track here. You can see all the tracks, you can see all the channels. Now note, in OBS originally it was track 2 through 6, but because we're not outputting track 1, Shotcut, or the recording, only knows it as track 1 through 5 because it's starting at 2 and thinking that's 1. So this track 1 is going to be where we output everything at the same time, and then our individually split up channels, and then all. Personally, I've found that all does not work properly with Shotcut, so it's one of those things. Yeah, so I just haven't had any luck with using that all feature there, so I don't use that at all. It didn't seem to work, and that's why I'm saying you want to output everything to track number 2 in your OBS settings, because it'll be track 1, and then you'll be playing all of your audio by default. Now, say that you have a little section that you messed up, you want to do some changes, so on, or you need to split up your audio. We're going to take that original clip that has the video clip that also has the audio. We're going to throw it in our timeline here. And then we're going to go under Properties and we're going to select the very specific audio track that we wanted. So our microphone is going to be on this track. So again, it should be on the second audio track. And we can just zoom in a little bit here. I don't know if no, the audio waveform isn't showing up. Sometimes it does that, which is rather annoying. So what we can do is we can turn this, let's see. Something seems to be a little wrong there. Maybe my settings were different when I recorded this. I'm not sure. That was the wrong. Well, whatever. Oh, that is always frustrating when that happens. I don't see. Oh, there we go. It is there now. So what I've done is, let's actually unmute this in the recording. Not as well developed as these. So for whatever reason, it was on track 3, which would be track 4. So I just had it set up a bit differently. It's not showing up the audio waveform, which is super annoying when it does that. Sometimes it just does that, and that really sucks because a lot of my editing, I am looking for those audio waveforms. Now, a thing that really sucks about this method of having this multi-track audio and trying to find what you need is you have to know where it is in here. So if you don't put this other track of audio and plan from the beginning to make edits that adjust it and keep it in sync with your content, well, you're going to run into some issues. So if we scroll right to the very end, you'll see how that's a lot longer. Well, you can actually start seeing some audio waveforms there. So yeah, there's definitely some issues here in terms of trying to get it to sync up, trying to find the right spot. It can be quite a bit of work, but we'll talk about how we actually do the editing, break things up, and so on now. So that's where we get into a lot of these other buttons here. So most important one, split at playhead. So this white bar is called playhead. And then whichever track you have selected, you're going to press S or click the button if you want, and it's going to create a split at that spot where your playhead is. You find your next spot, you press S again. Now we've got a little segment, say this is what we wanted, or we want to delete it. So if we want to delete it, we can use our hotkey to lift and remove it without affecting the position of things, or we can do the ripple where it affects the position of things. And there's a couple things that are important once you start getting into multiple tracks like this to think about is you've got ripple, trim, and drop. So whenever you trim things or you drop things, it will ripple everything for you. You've got ripple edits across all tracks. So this one is very important with multiple tracks is, do you want removing this to cause everything else to get affected? So in this case, I don't. So I would turn that off. And when I remove it with a ripple edit and it moves everything, you can see the rest of my tracks remain unaffected. So we'll undo that change. We'll turn it on. And then we'll do a ripple. Oop, that was a lift, not a ripple. That was the wrong button entirely. I didn't have the right part selected. So there you can see now every other track in here has been shifted, a split's been made, it's been removed. And so if you start off with everything in sync and you, before you do any edits, you bring down your video, bring out the additional audio channels as you go. If you have this feature turned on, it will keep everything in sync with how it originally was. And the ripple, trim, and drop, that one, a lot of times I don't use, but there are some times when it does come in use. So, but it can really screw you up because as you can see right there, I moved something around and everything else got affected by it. So you really want to think carefully about how you're planning to use it. So there will be some cases where, say that we're going to turn off affecting all of our tracks right now. So let's say I just lifted that and I really want to have this moved over like this so that it lines up, which I can do by manually dragging. And as long as I have this ripple, trim, and drop, if there were any other segments after this segment, they'd get moved as well. Everything would get shifted over, which is quite important. You don't want to have a bunch of things over on the right side of your timeline way down the way that aren't being moved when you think they will, but you want to make sure you're not doing that ripple edit across all tracks. That's an important thing. So, as you can see, that just screwed up my video entirely by having it ripple across all tracks. So there's times when you do need that, times when you don't. It's up to you to really think about these settings and think about when you should be using each one and being careful to make sure which ones are turned on at the right time. The other thing is toggle snapping that I kind of skimmed over. Toggle snapping just means that as you drag stuff, it wants to snap into place there so that you get that nice clean they match up rather than having them kind of just be at a weird spot. Now, there are some times where this feature, toggle snapping, is really going to screw with you. So toggle snapping is really nice at times for moving stuff around. It really sucks for doing the automated transitions. So there's two different ways to do automated transitions in here. So let's turn off that, and I'm going to show you the two different ways. So the first one is just simply drag one over top of the other. So that can work out quite well. We've now got a transition between these two things. They happen to be audio in this case, and it's automated. You can go under properties and you can choose how you want the settings to be. With audio, there are a lot of times where you want to mix it to be either A, which is everything on the left side of the transition, or B, everything on the right side, and you only want one audio track. You usually don't want to do the crossfade. Crossfade tends to work really well, though, for video. Otherwise, it's not really a transition at that point if it's all mixed to one. Oh, that's audio anyways. There is no option for video. So that's the first way that we can create a transition. The other way we can create a transition, and not always, but usually this is the way I prefer to create transitions, is to select either the beginning. You'll see that there's a bit of green under my cursor, and drag it over like this. Or red means that we're dragging from A over top of B. And what this requires is it does require that you actually have additional file length. So something like a still image, you can't go further towards the beginning. Don't know why, just can't move further towards the beginning, but you can easily move further towards the edge. Now, video content, same idea, that you can't, or other audio content, you can't drag it on either end if you're already at the end. So let's do our audio file down here. So I can't make the start any longer. I can make the start shorter. And then if we go and we scroll to the other end here, our audio, I can't go ahead and make it longer. I can only make it shorter. So that's an important thing to know, is that, these files, but when we're doing something like our splits and our stuff like that, so we make a split right there. And let's say that I want to cut out this little piece right here. We'll just do a lift just to show you. Well, now I want to merge these two pieces together with a transition. So I can either find a spot here where I want that, where I know that this part's going to be the overlap, and I'm going to drag it over, get that nice overlap there. Or, if these two are snapped together, we can just remove the space in here. Then I can choose, and in either direction that works. So one way that this quite often manifests itself in the actual video is, so there are times where I make edits where I just want just take out a little bit and it's supposed to be continuous.
And get a result.
But you can see somewhere like here where there's actually a change
get a result
in between what's happening. So if I wanted a nice smooth transition, I've got a couple of options. Hold on. So there's edits after here. So I want to ripple, trim, and drop, so that when I drag this out, everything else moves with it. So what I could do is I could expand this part, and I
get a
figure
result
out,
for bulk.
okay, where is it that I actually want to create that area that will be used for the transition. So I can say I want this area to be used for the transition. And then, yeah, that's a great, this one, again, I can drag it back this way and see, okay, yeah, there's a bunch of area in here. What's it look like? Yeah, that can all be used for the transition. So it's up to you how you want to create this transition space. You can either have this transition space pre-made by leaving a bit of extra room, so that when you drag over top here, you're going to get that transition
and get a result for
default, just a quick dissolve.
Get a result for bulk.
And then, or alternatively, if you want to remove the space here and you want to drag back, oh gosh, that was not right. So turn off ripple, trim, and drop. Ah, damn it. So now we can drag it out over this way, and then we can have our video have that nice, long transition
and get a result
to really
for
show
bulk.
off how it works. Now in here, the audio I wanted that was correct was on channel A, so I'm going to go mix channel A. Or if I wanted it to be channel B, I would just slide it all the way to channel B. So this way, the audio is still going to be everything that's from the left side of where that transition, where those two pieces butt up to each other, even though the video is now transitioning there. So that's quite often how I do my transitions, is I just drag that way. But there are definitely some times where it's complicated to find out the exact transition to make it work really nicely when you're dragging like that. So there will be times where your sentinels offer a lot of different. I'll say, okay, I'll pick a spot and your sentinels off and leave that empty space so that I can control that a little bit nicer. And then, saying that. So just looking through my audio waveform here, seeing, okay, there's no audio at all for quite a while. So yeah, I can see I'm doing nothing in here. So I could remove that. And we're just using our ripple delete. And in this case, I don't actually have all the ripple edits across tracks turned on. Usually you would in a case with multiple tracks like this with this audio underneath, but since we all added this in afterwards, it's really not there anyways. So now I've got, oops, that was not the button. That's not what I wanted to do. It dragged stuff on me. So now I can see I've got this area here and I've got this area here, and I'm very happy to just drag them over like this. And then let's look at how that transition turns out. Pretty nice. I don't need to really do anything with the audio because there was no real audio in either spot there. So sometimes that can really simplify it, doing it that way. But if you're 90% of the time, it's very, very easy to just find the spot in the audio where you want to get started, take that out, and then simply just drag this over here. And it's very, usually you're going to have consistent video before that and it'll just turn out fine. There may be some times where you had a sudden change in video followed by another sudden change and it can create a really weird transition. In that case, you'd have to do what I just showed you previously to do a bit of that manual adjustment. So we've talked a bit about the transitions and how we make them, and it really started off with the toggle snapping and talking about how that can be problematic. I want to show you what happens if you turn on the toggle snapping again and you try and do this method of dragging. Do you see that? How messed up that is compared to where my cursor is. So that toggle snapping makes it very hard to control creating this type of transition where you drag the start or the end of a segment and extend it over top of a different one. If you are simply just doing the drag and drop overlap, it's not so bad. There'll be a little bit of area where it automatically snaps, but you never want a transition that's that short anyways. So it's not a big deal when you're doing that type of transition. So yeah, considering that these days I find the majority of my transitions are this kind of drag the start or end of a segment over top of the other one, like by expanding it, I find it's better to have it off when I do those transitions in general. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about some things that might have been obvious after watching me do these edits and so on. So in each track, when you've created a segment and you select it, that segment, you can apply custom filters to just that segment. So very common example with something like text or whatever, you might want to say size, position, and rotate. So we need to set our playhead up to actually see where it is so that we can do this graphically. So I can drag it around like this and I can change it. Very nice graphical interface. You can also do, rotating, stuff like that. Now, the other thing that I haven't played with is I haven't played a lot with the size, position, and rotate adjusting itself throughout the video. So if you want like a constant zoom me in effect or zoom me out effect, I did watch a tutorial on YouTube on how to do this, and I've already forgotten how to do it. I did it in one video. There is definitely a way that you can transition this scale, size, so on, to create like a nice smooth zoom instead of having to create multiple little segments where you constantly are editing the filters. So if you want it to be just a sudden change, oops. Yeah, okay. If you want it to be just a sudden change, you can definitely do this if you want it to be that nice and impactful kind of like back and forth. Because there are definitely going to be times when that's exactly what you want, and you want it to be kind of this, whoa. Oh, I have this audio track on down here. So you probably heard absolutely nothing blaring over this. So I can mute that temporarily. Anyway, so that's that. You've got filters. There are a bunch of different filters that are extremely useful. The ones that I use the most often would be the fade in or fade out, whether that be audio or video, the size, position, and rotate, mute, gain, or volume. So if you want to, this is very useful. This music, it always comes in way too loud. So this always gets a gain filter, generally, minus 27 to minus 32 decibels. So now if we listen to that, it's not really interfering as much with me talking, and that makes a huge difference. So, and again, we were talking about the fade in video, so you can change how long you want that fade animation to last. The thing is, though, it always fades in from black. That's one thing I haven't figured out if you can change with the program. That's a bit frustrating, is it always starts there as black, so it can look really weird. So for example, if we go back to our playlist and we add in this image as a static image, and we could copy the filters if we wanted. So there we just copied, and then we select the segment we want to put them on, paste, and you can see it's changed the size. It's added that fade in. So you see how it just starts as black square. Let's actually just move it a little bit so that it's a bit more obvious how it starts as black. So it's a bit annoying. I haven't looked around too much to see if there's anything you can do to change that. Just starting, oh, here we go, right there. Adjust opacity instead of fade with black. So glad I actually decided to take a look. So there we go. Now it comes in, instead of starting black, it just becomes more visible. If we want to make that effect a lot more pronounced, we'd crank that up to 3 seconds. Now it's going to be a much longer effect, and you can see how it really fades in. So that's nice. I learned something new while showing you guys how to do this. So I'm happy as well. So I've jumped around a lot. These are just very common things to me at this point that I do about how I use the program, how I use the tools. The main thing to remember is you've got timeline editing down here, where everything's in a linear timeline, and you stack layers on top of each other. When it comes to video layers, you have to have, different layers for each object you want visible, and they'll overlay themselves on top of each other, with the highest layer being what's overlaid on top of the lower layers. Audio just combines itself together in a sense. You occasionally do need multiple audio tracks because you're trying to add different audio sources at the same time. Unlike videos, there is nothing visual, so they interfere with each other noise-wise. So for example, if we had this section here where we had some sound going on and it overlaps with this other section down here, you might say, okay, I want to create a segment here and I want to apply a custom filter to this segment to either make it louder or quieter while it's overlapping with this other segment. So, sometimes you're going to have to do some editing like that, where you're going to say we've got these overlapping segments, we're going to add in our filters. Maybe I want this segment to be a little bit louder while it's overlapping with the other one. And who knows, maybe I even want to make this one louder. So your audio, you can have these segments, and you can edit them, the volume, the gain, some filters like that. But otherwise, unlike video, there's no visual aspect to deal with. So as long as you still need to have one audio track for every audio source you want to add simultaneously, same way that video is like that. So if there's one spot in your project where you need to add 5 video or 5 audio, you're going to need 5 tracks for the entire project for that video audio. You can't have it just for that one area. But it's fine, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't hurt you to have these empty audio tracks down there. The only time it could make an issue is if you accidentally select the wrong track while using hotkeys to try and edit stuff. If there's nothing in there, it's not a big deal, except that it defaults to the first track. So yeah, bit of annoyance. But so that's another thing you got to be very aware of, is that whatever track you have selected, that's the one that's going to be impacted by things like your split at playhead or your lift or ripple delete, so on. So yeah, and then there's sometimes where I want to move audio chunks or video chunks around. And again, this whole idea, we just create segments, and then I could lift it up here, and I could say, okay, well, this is just a very simple example, but let's say that I wanted to take this little segment and flip it around with this segment. So I drag this one out of place. I find the segment that I want to be over here. You can drag it with snapping on, or you can simply do the remove. But that remove shifted everything with it and didn't leave me enough space. So one thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to make sure we turn on the ripple trim and drop. We're going to move this out that way. We can turn it back off. And then we can now insert it in here with lots of room. And then we can simply just remove these two little spaces on either side. So that's kind of the general idea. Everything you can break into these little segments, you can move them around. You just have to be very careful about how you're moving stuff, making sure that you're not accidentally overwriting things, that you're not causing things to shift that you didn't intend to shift, so on. Yeah, there's a lot of little things that you sometimes have to keep track of. Thankfully, this one specifically, we'll just close it out. Don't save any of the changes. The point that I had it at, oh gosh, don't save. So the point that I had this file at, everything's good with just one timeline currently. So right now, all my audio has been good on a single timeline, and it makes it very simple. And if I do need to mix and match things and move them around, I've got a few options. I can choose to use the cut or the copy button to take something out and then to put it somewhere else. I can use something like the append feature, or I can use something like the overwrite clip, which again, rarely ever use that. Or I can create an extra video track like I showed you in the previous example to drag it into the extra video track, move things around. So let's just say that I want to copy that piece and I want to append it. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So append only puts it at the very end of your video, so not always that useful. So that's where generally you would need to create a break. Now, if you can see, let's zoom way out so we can see a bunch of my edits at the same time. All right, so you can see a bunch of places where I've created segments to take out stuff I didn't want in the video, stuff that shouldn't be there, or just I don't think will be interesting to people, or mistakes I made. See all these segments. If I find that a segment here, this one I just created, if I find that I really want to move it further down in the video, that's going to be very easy to figure out how to do. So what I can do is I can figure out the spot where I want to put it later in the video. Let's say I want to insert it here, and I can just make that space. And now I can go back and I can plunk it in right there, and then I can remove all those excess spaces that I've just created. So it's pretty easy when we're coming from that point of view. It is definitely harder when we're coming from the point of view of we're going back through an area we've heavily edited and we decide, oh crap, I really want to make space to move this piece and swap them around. That's where I find it's best just to create another video track and just do it in that other video track rather than trying to change these settings for your ripple and, other stuff. I find at this point it's just so much easier to say, I can take this piece, move it up on the other track. This piece that I want to put in, I can do a cut, and then we can do just paste, just a normal paste. So when we do the paste, it automatically ripples everything over. And what I did wrong there though, I made a mistake. I didn't want to use the cut. So what I want to do is I want to copy it, and then I want to press my Z to lift it, and then we can paste it in here. And again, I accidentally had the wrong track selected, so it put in the wrong spot. So we can just do that again, and then we can do Control V, paste. We can remove these dead spaces here, and then we can simply drag this one into place. So again, they get a few more examples of how I actually go about using these different splitting the source material into these different segments to be able to manipulate and move them around. As I said, a lot of my editing is looking at the audio waveform to look for areas where I'm not actually speaking into the camera. Now, there are some times where it stops loading the audio waveform like this. Sometimes the program just takes a bit to catch up. Other times, you're better off just saving all your work, reopening the program, and a lot of times your performance will be a lot better. It's just something to do with the way that it allocates stuff in your system memory, your RAM. Sometimes it's just better to save everything, close it, start again, and it just gives it a nice new fresh start and things are working a lot better. Last button we didn't talk about too much was Scrubball Dragging. This is very useful because this allows me to hear the audio and see the changes in the video as I'm dragging. It's not consistently always going to work that well. As you can see, sometimes the computer just can't handle the software's way of asking for that request. So sometimes you have to go to a spot, wait for a little bit, and then you can start dragging. And then if you go too fast, it's like, oh crap, I can't keep up. So, and then, you can drag around and find, it's not working. So just take your fingers off for a couple seconds and then start dragging again. So very useful to have that on, I find. So now that we've talked about how these different controls work, how you get to actually manipulate stuff, how you can move things around, have multiple tracks, applying filters, doing properties, that nice, easy auto scene transition feature we showed you, very useful. Use it a lot. Let's talk about the actual editing process. So first off, I have to make the video itself. So I make a recording and then I come in here and sometimes I start editing and decide, crap, this is a mess to edit. I have just done such a poor job at recording it that to make a nice edit is crap. And I throw it out, delete it, and I just go start all over again with the recording. Oh, that can be a really frustrating experience at times. It can feel really defeating having to go and start all that over again. But sometimes it's just the best way. Sometimes it's what you need to do. So yeah, you really want to occasionally think about that. And sometimes you can just delete a segment and you can do a recording, re-record just a segment. So I come in here and let's say that it passes well enough and I say, you know what, this is decent. Usually I find out after maybe 10 minutes of editing, 5 minutes of editing, if I'm actually liking enough. Sometimes I just know from the recording, and before I even get into editing, I just say, no, thank you. We're getting out of here. And yeah, so sometimes that's what I do right away. Just get out of the recording that I'm currently making and start all over. And then other times I have to be in the editing by the time I realize, oh gosh, I have made this way too difficult on myself. Time to change this all up and edit again, or at least, maybe a few minute segment of the video re-edit. So depending on the complexity of the project I'm doing, yeah, that can really happen. It can really suck. So there's a few things I do. So the first thing I do is I just go through and I look for all the little stuff I want to trim out. So you can see that I've already made a bunch of edits. So all of these edits are just finding little stuff that I can trim out that either shouldn't be in there at all, or I've decided, you know what, maybe I don't need that after all. So we move along our timeline. Let's get up to the area where we were caught up to previously. So generally what I would do is I look around for dead spots in the audio at the very beginning. Any big dead spots can be taken out, but I don't do it just by scrubbing around and looking because there's a lot of stuff I could potentially miss. So really what I end up doing is I end up playing it and then I put it on double speed, which the radio utility that they offer, well, they are stealth class because sadly this program doesn't do a great job at doing audio in double speed. So it takes a lot of concentration to pay attention to. So the smuggler, going back to them, they mainly like to roll around and you can have that roll. Yeah, makes it sound a little bit weird. Basically what I'll do is I'll just start watching the video in double speed and I'll be paying attention, listening, thinking, does this make sense? Should that be in there? I'm just checking everything that I edit, except for some very simple stuff. I tend to actually listen to the whole recording at least twice. It takes a very long time. So if I have a 10-minute recording and I'm doing editing on a 10-minute recording, I might only spend 15 minutes actually listening to it because a bunch of it is listened to in double time speed, but chances are I'll basically listen to, large amounts more than once. So generally it's not like as if I just listen to it all over again once. While doing editing, there's a lot of times where I have to go back and re-listen to certain parts. But right off the bat, I'm just finding some areas where either, oh, that was pointless, I didn't need to say that, or I have an area where I recorded something, found out I didn't like it, and then just re-recorded that on the fly. So I'm like, oh, that last 5 minutes where I made all these little edits, turns out that's all garbage and getting thrown out the window because now I've got the spot where I resaid that portion much better. But in general, I just start off and I'm just finding all these little spots. So ums, ahs, pauses, breaks. We go ahead. we're going to look at that and say, I did forget to mention that there, so then I can remove it with the ripple delete. So it shifts everything over. And, I'm going to find all these little spots like that. And I just start doing these edits. And sometimes I find bigger spots that I want to delete. And I just keep doing this. And that's what I do, is I keep going through figuring out what needs to come out, what doesn't. And I usually don't catch everything in the first go. The first go is generally the worst offenders, the long breaks, the stuff where I easily catch that, oh, hey, I re-recorded this little part here. I talked for 30 seconds, realized I made a mistake, and then started over again. Cool, I can delete that 30 seconds, plus a little bit of a pause. And then, I go back through and I look and I say, oh crap, this video is way too long. How do I balance out trying to make a video that's not ridiculously crazy, over the top long, to the point where a lot of people just won't watch enough of it? I would love to be able to have an hour-long video of me just sitting here talking and you guys sitting there and enjoying the full hour and watching everything. This is going to be a long video right here, but most of that won't do well. So as a creator, you really have to try and think, I need to create stuff that people are going to watch, so that at some point I'm not doing this for free and I'm not spending a whole bunch of my free time on something that at the end of the day doesn't get me any real return on investment. So a lot of times I'll find out, crap, it's still way too long. And that's where I start going back through and I start saying, well, did I really need to tell them about this bit of information? This one right here, this recording you're watching, I could have done that. I could have gone back and I could have taken a whole bunch of stuff out. I really could have simplified. I could have made notes beforehand. I could have said, this is this, but you know what? Fuck it. Right now I'm in a lazy mood. I have not been throwing out a lot of good content lately, or I haven't been having the energy to create a lot of my more complex content. And this one, I'm trying to recharge some of my energy, my enjoyment of just being able to talk and share these things without thinking a ton about, I've got to make it catered towards a certain audience, or, are people going to watch it, or this, and a lot of the stuff I've done a lot of editing on, I don't even get that many views. So it's kind of like, was that really worth it? Probably not. I probably should have just made something else entirely. So yeah, this one, I'm putting it up there just because it's something I want to do to kind of recharge some energy, get some enjoyment out of the process that I like about being creative or recording stuff, and have a bit of a conversation with you, the viewer. So that's why we're here, and we're at the 57-minute mark already. So yeah, as I was saying, we're going back through a lot of videos I've created are way too long. So a lot of editing, trimming stuff out, taking stuff out. Sometimes I'm finding bigger sections that I need to re-record. Hopefully I don't have too many problems like that I didn't identify before I did the majority of editing, because it can be very time consuming to have done an hour of this little small editing that you see all these edits that are already in here, and then find out that a big chunk that I've done all that little editing on was just pointless and I'm going to throw it out anyways. So yeah, it's something that I'm still working on. All right, so getting better at. Talk about the tank and making sure that I have the right amount of time spent in the right areas, or knowing when it's worth just we've got under the. But yeah, in general, if I make Juggernaut your 10-15 minute video, chances are that was probably 4 hours or more of work for me to make that. There's some things that I come up with, the ideas, I mull them over and think about them for a while, and then when I sit down and record, I have a really good idea of what I want, and maybe it's half an hour to an hour of actual work recording, and it comes out really great, very little editing, and I don't have to do much. But there's still things I forget sometimes. Like sometimes I forget my intro. That's a very common thing, is I forget to introduce the video, introduce myself, or whatever I want to say, so that gets recorded after when I'm doing editing, and then I throw it in on the front. Or I forget an outro to say, hey, thanks for all your support, or, have a great day, stuff like that. So there's always things that potentially need to be re-recorded or recorded after the fact, thrown back in, forget about. And part of that is because I don't have a script sitting in front of me. That's something that could be a little more organized, to have like a little checklist to go through. But most of the time it's not a big deal. Now, there is some content where I've actually ended up making a script for it. Approximately, it's not a teleprompter type script where I read it word for word, but it helps keep me on track, and I can check it over every now and again as I'm doing the recording to make sure I'm on track, talking about the right topics, and then I can edit that out later if I need to. The dead space in between me checking, so on. Or, I can pause the recording, line things up, and then start on that segment. So there's a lot of things you can do during the recording process and the preparation for the recording process that can really cut down on editing time. I'm not a huge fan of this portion of the editing. Sometimes I've had a lot of fun learning about the different features by using them, adding in new audio, adding in new transitions, adding in all this different stuff. But once you kind of have learned it all and it just becomes like work because, you're trying to fix up and create a product that people are going to feel like the time was well spent watching, yeah, it can be a bit frustrating. And a lot of times that advanced preparation can really help with cutting down on that, and so it can be very useful to have a little bit of a script, some notes to, pause your recording when you need to look and see if you're on the right track, on the right spot, and, set up things. So, if you're going to have multiple different files that you want to have showing up on your recording, we talked about a little bit in OBS here about how on our 16:9 recording we had some still images. Well, I can add even more. Like I can add, if I want to have text overlay, so I could have text overlay, we'll call it that, and it's a still image, and then I can browse for it, and I can go under my temp editing files. And you've seen this in some of my videos. Some of my videos actually do have this kind of stuff where the text is overlaid. So now I have something that I can quickly toggle on and off, make sure I have those files prepped in advance. But the nice thing is I can hit this pause button on OBS, which I'm not going to do right now, and I can change these out, and I can go under my, properties, and I can change this to what I want it to show up next. Some of the stuff, it's really good to do while you're in the recording stage versus doing the editing stage. I find that it's a lot smoother. And then other times, oh, so be it. You can definitely do all of this in editing. It's not too bad to do the majority of the stuff in editing. So, yeah, but definitely a little bit of planning can go a long way. And there's a reason why a lot of times I actually end up re-recording videos is that I've actually found that it's easier most of the time to record the video again instead of trying to fix that much stuff in editing. So the amount of time you spend editing can be very large, especially from my experience on the way that I edit and the way I go through stuff. It just takes a long time. So let's say now that you've gone through, you've made all of your edits, you've taken out all the segments you don't want, rearranged things you do want, put in new stuff that you wanted to add in, your audio, you've done, your filters, you've done your transitions, you're ready to export. Awesome. So export. Now, what I've done is I've created custom export saved, but basically what I've done is I've taken the H.264. They do have a YouTube one, very low quality output though. I don't suggest that one at all. So I've taken the H.264 main profile. I'm not really sure on all the differences between high and main profile. So I went H.264, and then under advanced, you want to make sure you go into your codec and you want to set 55% is pretty low quality. So 75% should be your minimum unless you really don't care about quality. 75% is, you're going to notice some quality loss. 80% looks pretty good. 85% looks really good. So 85% is getting close to being lossless. It's not quite there, but it's pretty good. And then what I did was, once I had all of this done, really codec's the only thing I've had to change with this main profile. So under here, you can choose interpolation. You can definitely change that if you want to change that to the best quality. But codec, you really do need to change the quality percentage. So you can change some audio. You usually don't need to. And then what I can do is, oh, I forgot where it is. This is why it's great to just pause your OBS recording while you look at something. So all you have to do is down on the bottom left here, hit the little plus button, and whatever current settings you have, you can see them all in here, and you can double check that you're happy with them. So, if we look and we say, okay, yeah, it's changed my deinterlacer method, frame rate number. I don't know why it's that number, but sure, that's what it gave it. It works. Here's my resolution, 1920 by 1080. Which I might actually want to change. Oh no, this one is already 19. This is 1920 by 1080. This is an older recording. So yeah, all the settings there, you'd give it a name and then you'd save it. So I already have it here. For whatever reason, it saved it as 84%, even though I had 85. Whatever, I'm not worried about that 1%. So then we can just hit export file. We can choose where we want to save it and wait for it to finish. You could turn on hardware encoders if you know how those work. My CPU is more than fast enough, so I haven't had any issues with just using CPU encoding and not having to worry about potential losses from the hardware encoder. So even though I shouldn't have any since I'm using hardware encoder to record it in the first place, but I've just been like, yeah, CPU works fine for me, so we'll just leave it at that. Then you're going to have an exported video. So once I've got an exported video, there still is another step. I still need to go through and listen to it. So basically what I'm going to do in here is I'm not actually going to listen to the whole thing like I would if I was doing the editing. So usually I've listened to everything during the editing. And if I have, I'm just going to spot check. I'm going to come in, I'm just going to go to a few spots, make sure that there's no real audio issues, just check here and there. And really it's just listening for audio and seeing that everything looks correctly from what I remember editing. Now there are some where I don't do much editing at all. And I just kind of like, take some bits here and there, a bit of laser editing. And those ones I will watch through 100%. And I'll watch the whole thing to make sure that I didn't accidentally leave something in that I didn't mean to. For example, if I've got people on Discord that are coming through on the audio, I'll listen through and make sure that I don't have anything inappropriate coming through from that Discord conversation that I think, people might get really offended or upset about. So yeah, there's always that additional check that I do here. And then there's some things like creating the thumbnail. So some of my thumbnails probably suck. Some of them are good. But sometimes that can be the most frustrating part for me is trying to think of the actual thumbnail stuff. Like I can spend a lot of time trying to think of a good thumbnail because a big thumbnail can make or break how successful your video is, as well as title. So thumbnails is something that, oh man, sometimes I get so frustrated and I'm like, I've got the video ready, I want to upload it, but I still need a thumbnail. So yeah, we get our thumbnail and then we can upload our video along with the thumbnail. So that is the editing that I do. That's the process. One thing I did forget to mention, I said I was going to talk about earlier, was audio sync issues. So now because I've already started editing this, we go under properties and audio, you can see I've already got my delay put in there. 123 milliseconds is what I found was close enough. I don't do anything to professionally exactly line up. There are ways to do it. To me, not worth it. I just spend 2 minutes just replaying certain scenes while listening to see that it's close enough that you won't really notice that the audio is out of sync. And generally it ends up being a fairly consistent number between recordings, but it's not exact. There are some where I'm sitting at 80, somewhere I'm sitting at 120, and somewhere I'm sitting at 180 milliseconds. So it definitely can vary. But this is what I've done before I started doing any editing, because once you start breaking into segments, those segments will all have different properties, and it can be really annoying. What you can do though, and I've never actually tested it, but I'm assuming it would work, is just select all the segments and then go under audio properties and then tweak them there to the value you know is supposed to be the right value. But generally, if you can just remember to set that audio delay right at the beginning rather than later, you're going to save yourself some troubles. So yeah, as I was saying, generally it takes quite a while to actually do the editing compared to the length of the video. There are some videos that never see the light of day, and that's just how it is, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to do something that people are going to enjoy watching, that they're going to feel like I'm not wasting their time too much. And yeah, people are forgiving. I can swap in a few videos like this one every now and again that are just me rambling, a long video, and people like it. A lot of times I create the chapters within YouTube videos so that you can pick the little segments that matter to you. So I can give you a 1 hour video on a class guide, and you can just go to the sections that you find are important. Ideally, I'd love you to sit there and let the whole video play out, because that looks better for me. It increases my watched hours on YouTube towards becoming a monetized partner so that I can actually make, like $50 a year in AdSense revenue. Trust me, it's pretty bad AdSense revenue. So, but oh wow, I still want them to be things that you guys want to come back and engage with. Otherwise, I'm going to be dead in the water. If I make content and you regularly watch my videos and you're like, man, my time was wasted, you're going to stop coming back and watching my videos, and then that won't be good for either of us. So, yeah, there's definitely a fair bit of thought that tries to go into finding out content you are interested in. I've never really been a very creative person, so it's a bit of a challenge for me, something that I'm very unfamiliar with. I know that I'm not really that funny. I don't really get a lot of humor the same way that other people do. My sense of humor is a bit different or just non existent at times or inappropriate for YouTube. So I try not to go down that path of trying to force something that's hard. So I try and say, how can I make interesting content that people are actually going to want to watch and find enjoyable? So I try and play to my strengths. But at the same time, I think about, well, I recently uploaded a little video on dark light alignment setting. And it's like, why didn't I think about that earlier? I've got it in a really big video, but it's such a nice little feature. Just break it out into a short, quick 2-minute video and just, it's short, easy to digest. Try and make it a little bit funny. And yeah, you know, a lot of people are going to find that very valuable, that short little clip, rather than watching through that really long video I made for beginners, just to find that little nugget hidden in there. So, just trying to do stuff like that. Find ways to create content that isn't a big drain because, trying to actually go to work and hold down a job because that's actually what's going to pay for me to have rent. Or you can give it to my Patreon. I haven't really set up tiers or rewards on Patreon yet, but if you do go there and you contribute something, even before I have tiers, there'll definitely be some perks and rewards for people to recognize and say thank you. So, little shameless plug there. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this look into how editing works for me. Hope that if you're here to learn more about the tools themselves, that you found that very helpful about learning the basic free tools that I use to do this. Definitely wasn't to more advanced classes, really just right now, it's not paying the bills. I don't know if it'll ever pay the bills. So I'm just using free programs and doing very basic editing as much as I would like to do something more complex. It's just not in the cards until this actually becomes something that is paying for that investment of time. So yeah, at the moment, free software. Yay, free tools. As always, have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.